That are simply not present in the constituent parts.
You have to give me an example.
Well, I'm thinking chemical compounds. Say, what's the properties of water, for example?
It's based on H2O.
Wetness.
Yeah.
Let's take wetness as a freezing point.
Yeah. And
it can be a gas.
And wetness.
And what's the constituent parts of water?
H2O.
Hydrogen and oxygen.
Yes.
And the properties of hydrogen and oxygen are water. No.
Sorry, the properties of
hydrogen and oxygen.
Other than
Well, what's other? I mean, yeah. So you see where I'm going. You know, they have a particular atomic weight. They have a colour, maybe room temperature. They're a gas and that sort of thing. But nowhere, if you sat down and looked at hydrogen and oxygen, where does the wetness come from?
But the big problem with this is that you still get something physical. What we're saying with the reason argument is that what we mean by rationality is that you have an insight into a conclusion. So that insight, you see. So that's a different kind of argument.
But in principle, you accept that when you combine simple things, simple objects,
and that's what we mean by the potential.
Properties might emerge. That is what you mean by properties that weren't existent in the constituent.
Yeah, that's what we mean by potential as well.
So
as we know, adding.
So I would say, as a materialist, emergent materialist, I'd say essentially then the constituent atoms of one's body contain the potential for reason, amongst many other things, like the ability to digest food,
the only problem,
the ability to run a mile.
The only problem with this argument is because it's not a materialist issue really. It's more of a metaphysical question, because what you're really talking about is third person and first person realities. If you see the scientific method as third person, it's de-scoped when you're addressing the first person, and that's why, because rationality is linked to consciousness, right? So the problem here is, do we have a conscious stream of thinking, which is an internal,
At this point, we need to pin down what we mean when we talk about rationality, because I notice that in the other, we need to pin down what we're talking about when we talk about rationality and reason.
Yeah,
I notice that when you have the discussion, this is one of the problems, that nobody ever sits down and says, what are we talking about?
I try to explain to what reason is, but then
we might actually have different conceptions.
Absolutely.
So the whole conversation is kind of
absolutely.
Never
but
meeting,
obviously
really.
it was a bit of a
So let's do that.
So
what do we mean by rationality or reason? Are they synonymous?
Well, reason and rationality is linked to consciousness, and that's why you have to always bring consciousness. If you're going to discuss it on this deeper level, you have to bring it into play.
Right. Now, I didn't quite see it as that. If you like, my idea of rationality stroke reason is the faculty of applying a whole barrage, a set of tools, if you like, some of which are logic, observation, the ability to deduce conclusions from premises, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so
deduction might be part of reason.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree with that.
And it's a fairly vague term anyway, isn't it? But not necessarily consciousness. Is it consciousness? I mean, does a computer display reason, for example, when you program it to take in inputs, premises? I mean, there are such deduction machines.
Well, according to the functionalist, he would say there's no difference between the computer and a human brain.
Well, I didn't want to go into that argument. But is it displaying reason? I'm just trying to find out how we're using the word reason and rationality. So if I write a program, if I write a logic program that takes in premises and then deduces a conclusion, is it displaying reason in your use of the word or not? I would say it's displaying a sort of reason.
It is, but it's not. It doesn't have an insight into a conclusion.
Oh, that's a different thing, isn't it? This is insight. So we have something like reason plus insight.
Like insight is part of reason. That's
is it? Okay, if you like.
So when we deduce,
an insight being.
So when we deduce, we basically see the conclusion in our minds. Don't we?
Well, I don't know.
Well,
that's how it appears at the surface.
Just develop a deductive argument in your brain.
What's actually going on when we see?
Well, develop a deductive argument.
See the conclusion.
Yeah, develop a deductive argument in your mind, and then just find out how you conclude.
Yeah.
How do you conclude? What happens? What do you do?
Well, okay, it depends on...
Don't you see the conclusion? Do you have an insight into the conclusion?
I don't know, let's explore that. Just take the simplest possible syllogism, say, the classic one, all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, or Socrates is mortal. So what's going on there?
Yeah, how did you conclude?
A lot of people may not. They may not have learned how to do that because it's a fairly formal way of doing it. And people actually focus on you. Wait a minute. I'm just pointing out that a lot of people actually come up with the wrong conclusion.
Absolutely.
Or they might actually. If you turn that round a bit, and I can never remember what these logical fallacies are called. You might be able to help me, but what's the fallacy around that? Socrates is all men are mortal. Socrates is mortal, therefore Socrates is a man. Is that correct? Oh, you think it is?
I actually wasn't listening. It sounds like it's not correct, but go on.
Okay. You didn't see it? Like that. But that's an example of a fallacy, and I can never remember the Latin term for the fallacy, but it sounds very similar to the first example.
Some things we see, some things we don't. That's irrelevant. The point is,
sometimes we have to sort of engage the gears and think about
so do we have an
but
ability?
Is that seeing?
Do we have an ability to have an insight?
Yeah, I think this is something that Dan Kahneman points out in his book Thinking Fast and Slow. There's certain things that we see, and it feels magical. Well, we've all grown up so much with numbers that if I say what's 2 and 2, 4, just like that, you don't need to. You see it.
That's more memory.
But yeah, it's a kind of memory, is it? Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, something like that. It's sort of.
Like, I just remember my times table.
It's hardwired. Yeah, they plug it into you.
They do.
So certain
but
things.
in certain conclusions, I would argue that you definitely have an insight.
Certain things, and if now I've met you, I'll recognise you in the street. I don't have to think about it at all. You know, that's a sort of application of seeing, isn't it? So the way we're constituted is that this seeing is something that we can do over a range of competences.
Yes.
And it's kind of an automatic way, which, you know, as an evolutionist, you say, well, it's evolved in order to...
What's going in your mind then?
Well, you'd have to ask a neuroscientist.
Your insight could be... No, your insight could be wrong. The point is...
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so
you see a shadow and you think it's a tiger. Oh, it's actually just a tree.
So the point here is we have an insight into a conclusion. Our conclusions may be wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we have an insight, right?
Yeah.
And what I would say is that seeing, I would argue, can't be explained by materialism. Now, if you want to go down the evolution route, I think that's far more problematic. Because if you go down the evolution route, evolution is about survival and not rationality.
Yeah.
And that's why even the likes of O'Brien and O'Hare, they basically say that, well, you know, you could have non-rational beliefs that actually lead to survival.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So evolution can't be an explanation for the fact that we do have these truthful insights. We distinguish between truth and falsehood.
So broadly speaking, if you adopt this Kahneman's idea of thinking fast and slow, have you encountered that?
No.
Really good book, because it covers whatever angle you come at it from. Daniel Kahneman, he's a psychologist, experimental psychologist, and he and his partner Tversky, I can't remember his first name, he's dead now, but they spent their career analysing
the K.
Yeah, Kahneman. It's not a huge book, it's a popular book, and it's called Thinking Fast and Slow. It's one of those.
Okay.
You'll see it in Waterstones on the front there. You know, it's kind of popular side.
Sure.
But it's very interesting because he, apart, I mean, obviously as a debater, you'll find a lot of it actually practically useful because he systemizes cognitive biases.
Yes.
So if you think about confirmation bias, hasty generalizations, they're all listed.
Yep.
God knows, dozens of them. And he gives each one with, you know, examples and experiments they've done with, and it's. I mean, after getting halfway through the book, I thought, this is awful. We're just useless. How do we ever get through anything? But the point is the title, Thinking Fast and Slow. The hypothesis is essentially the fast bit, the 2 + 2 equals. So, do I recognise your face? It is, in layman's terms, hardwired in, and that's the stuff that evolution gives us. It's very error prone. It doesn't matter too much, because if I mistake a tree, that shadow, for a tiger, and I run, well, you know, it's better than mistaking a tiger for a tree and just hanging around. So in evolutionary terms, that points to why we can make errors, because we tend to make errors in a survivally advantaged way. But the other part, the slow, is the bit where I say, can you add 57 and 93? Actually, that's not too hard. But then you have to sort of sit down and start thinking about it and engaging. So there's another level of brain going on there. Entirely different mechanisms.
We make errors that are disadvantageous to our survival as well.
We do.
Yeah, exactly. So this is why the whole point of trying to claim that rationality can emerge from the evolutionary process is quite problematic. There's nothing necessary about that.
What I'm trying to say is I don't think that position really recognises the complexity of what's going on in rationality. And I've tried to give you an example as fast as so. Because I had a debate.
So would you agree that we do have an insight?
Yeah, as I said. I mean,
so I'm saying, how can you ground that using materialism? That would be my question. I was asking how.
Because if you follow what I say, I'm trying to separate out the different kinds of rationality. So when an atheist is trying to make his position,
there is different types.
He's not using that evolutionary given thinking fast method at all, which I absolutely agree with C.S. Lewis and those other thinkers you were talking about, Plantinga and so on. They argue, in fact, that it undermines atheism because if
absolutely, that's what we're talking about.
If reason is given by evolution only produces beings that are attuned to survival, not to thinking about the entirety of the universe, so atheism falls over. But I just think that's a flawed argument, because it misses out the thinking slow bit, the reason. So
because theism, classical theism appreciates that God created physical processes in the universe in order for them to emerge into different realities.
That's all right.
So that's not proper.
But that's all right. All it boils down to is as a theist.
As
a theist, you claim that somehow God puts into the universe the means for us to have reason.
No, we're not saying
that. Is that how you'd say that?
No, what we're saying is it's about explanatory framework.
Yeah.
So if you look at naturalism and you look at theism, which one accounts or explains or justifies rationality in a comprehensive way?
Yeah.
Naturalism does to a certain level, but theism does more comprehensively, so therefore it's a better working model for me.
I'm not sure I'd agree with naturalism does to a certain level. I mean, this is an opinion.
For the insight, you said.
Okay, if we go back to insight, I thought we had. Maybe we're using insight in a different way. I thought insight is that without engaging brain, you realise something. Is that what you're saying by insight?
No, what I'm saying is that you see into a conclusion.
Yeah.
If our brains are just based on physical processes that are blind, how can it see anything?
If our brain is based on physical processes, how can it see anything? Well, I mean, if you read various positions on the so-called mind-body problem, and there's various different takes on that.
Let's just discuss the takes.
As far as I can see as a layman,
you have functionalism.
I'm a layman. Yes, I know.
You have emergent materialism, the two types, weak and strong. You have behaviorism. You have reductive materialism, eliminative materialism.
I know.
So all of them. So
it's an open field, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. So what I'm saying is, I would humbly argue that they're all flawed.
And also, you've got theism. So
I think theistic dualism is the most coherent.
And I think emergent materialism is the most coherent. So at that point, we can leave it.
Good to speak to you.